Let's go ahead. Call the May 25th meeting of the Budget Advisory Committee to order, and we will start with calling the roll, starting with members of the committee. And I will start. Chelsea Union Camp, chair, is present.
Suzanne Dirksen is present.
Josh Newell is present.
Members of council?
Councilmember Rita Russell, present.
And Mayor Pro Tem Sierra let me know he cannot be here tonight, and so we will go to city staff.
Jenny Nolan, Budget Administrator, present.
Jackie Lowe, Direct Finance, present.
Well, that is everyone. We will move to approving the minutes from our April 27th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I move to approve April's minutes.
And I second that.
Anyone opposed to approving the minutes? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Great. They are approved. Okay, so our purpose tonight is to have a conversation and a bit of a working session around what we want our 2021 report to look like. Josh, as I think we've mentioned to you in the past, this is our one big thing that we do each year. We spend a lot of time listening and learning throughout the year, meeting with the departments, and just getting to hear about what's going on in the city, taking notes, and then sharing our thoughts with council as they are in their budget process about what we think about where money should be going, where cost savings could be happening, any changes that we recommend. In many ways, it's, in my opinion, less about the dollars and the cents and more about kind of broad trends and values and directional input from the committee. But Suzanne has been here longer than I do. Do you have any other kind of table setting about the report?
No, I think you're exactly right. It is very much less about the dollars and cents and more about representing thoughts on what's best for the community.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
So what I think would be helpful in the time that we have tonight, we've got about 40 minutes before Suzanne needs to be at her next meeting. And I think it'd be helpful for us to raise the issues that we would like to cover in the report, kind of see where we have some consensus, where we have agreement. Yes, let's include that, and then make a plan for how we're going to execute it. Typically, in years past, we have kind of sketched out an outline and assigned different sub-working groups to write different sections or individuals to write different sections. We've worked in a shared Google document to kind of compile those things, and typically have had one more meeting in between meetings to finalize and to work through edits and get to a good place before we have to submit. Jenny, before we jump in, can you remind me on timeline, because we have one more department actually next week. We have municipal courts. When the report needs to be submitted.
So if we're planning to, are we planning to have that report in council's hands before our first proposed meeting, August, I think it's August 3rd or 4th? Then I would suggest having that in by the end of July.
I had a handwritten note that said present.
Oh,
that said present to council July 26th.
Okay, so then we would need it the week that Wednesday before the 26th.
And I might be.
Or is it the 28th? I'm getting. Let me get a calendar out. Let me see.
Yeah. So July 26th is a Monday, and I wrote that down back in February, so it may have changed.
I can take a look at the council presentation and let everyone know the dates. Just a second.
Okay. And we could, if we needed to, we could even move that to August 2nd. Because I think we're planning our budget meetings on August 9th, since that would be a study session night versus a regular council meeting night. So depending on, we could look at, we'll look to see if the timing of the 26th or the 2nd would be best for you guys. What do you think?
If we do August 2nd, we could finalize at our July meeting on the 27th and it'd be ready to submit on the 28th, the next day. Then we wouldn't have to do an ad hoc meeting.
Yep. And the only caveat for my fellow back members is that I'm going to be traveling, mostly off the grid. I'm not sure what kind of technology I'll have with me, but I'm going to be traveling through the 26th/27th. So I would do as much as I can to contribute through Wednesday, July 14th, and then check in with you as I can to remain engaged for those remaining 10 days. But just something to keep in mind.
My wife's due date is August 5th, so my schedule is completely undetermined on that stretch. So I'll just manage it the best I can as we get there.
Yeah, so it sounds like with those two things in mind, we should probably put ourselves ahead of the game and try to get this done sooner than later.
Okay.
Agreed.
Right?
So we'll plan on the 26th then,
Okay.
if that's good for everybody.
And by everybody, I think we mean Chelsea.
Doing it by myself. Is that my understanding, right? That you will not be available to help present on if it's the 26th, Suzanne?
Me personally, I
Yeah.
will be out of the country.
So, well, then does it actually make more sense then to do August 2nd? Would you be available to be there
Sure.
then?
Yeah, we could do that.
I'm just thinking because then.
Yeah, Josh will be iffy, but at that point we'll have 2 new members who could also be there in support.
Right. It might just be nice to have another person who's been here the whole last year, especially if I don't have Joel. It might be nice to have one partner, if you don't mind, Suzanne.
Absolutely. Sure.
So maybe August 2nd it is. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And then
With the intent that we'll have all the materials complete at least a week in advance.
Yeah.
Considering my schedule and Josh's.
Yep. So we'll plan that we'll have everything ready, you know, by the before the 21st, by the 14th. Or the
July 4th. I'm sorry.
Yeah. When do you
I'm
leave?
mixing up my months.
When do you leave on your trip, Suzanne?
I leave Thursday, July 15.
Okay, so we'd probably want to try to get as much wrapped up by the 14th as possible.
Yes.
And just some minor edits after that. And then I think that's good breathing room for everybody.
I agree. So, right. Okay. Thanks for helping us with that.
Absolutely.
So that's our timeline. I have kind of a list of ideas. I'm sure other people have some thoughts as well. Does anyone want to start with anything that they would like to propose for the report?
Well, I can run through the items that I highlighted that I took away from the presentation. So this doesn't necessarily reflect my opinion on what we should add, but I think it's a good starting point. So in no particular order, when we heard from the city manager / city clerk's office, they talked about support for records management. From PD, so the back has, and almost every annual report that I've contributed to, we have somehow advocated for financial support for the police department, and Chief Collins is very conservative about what he asks of council and the community, and I remember him commenting that a lot of the police department's needs have been met or are being met, and the only thing he really spoke to was enhancing the co-responder program. I would be okay if we did not speak to PD this year. There's no harm in supplementing the co-responder program. So if we do speak to PD, I think that would be the way to do so. Community development. There was talk about the block grant that supported, I think, 10 to 12 households in a given year. It's a federally funded grant, but it's always at risk of, the department's always at risk of losing that funding. So if the city could supplement that, that would be advantageous to families who need it. Public Works, there were a lot of things. So let's just make a note for all things Public Works. What stood out was traffic operations and trash administration. Oh, and also community outreach with respect to single hauler trash service, should that be implemented. Next topic was, this has come up a few times, not related to any department in particular, but a grant writer on staff. Reserves are always an excellent topic of discussion, and human resources just requested more FTE support, and we can drill down to the details with that as we look through my notes. So that's what I highlighted from our conversations over the last several months.
Definitely see some overlap in my list. I will run through some of mine too. I was thinking about it a couple of different ways. And Josh, I don't mind going next since I know you haven't been here for all of these, so I'll run through and I'm sure you have some.
Please do, yeah.
But I would also like, we think we did this last year, Suzanne, where we kind of just like started with some gratitude and like some reflection on how we feel about the city. And from my perspective, the COVID response has been just really exceptional in every department, and the support for small businesses and for individuals, I've just been really impressed with a lot of resourcefulness. And so I think communicating that would be nice. But then also, as we emerge from COVID, I would really love to see the city kind of continue to keep tabs on funding for kind of vulnerable populations in our community and people who are recovering from the pandemic, like small businesses or individuals, around that grant for the housing rehabilitation stuff, around the economic development grants that we've seen potentially could be in jeopardy this next year, small business grants that have been happening to kind of recover out of COVID. I think continuing and just expressing maybe some more like cross-departmental, but maybe thematic funding as these things come up. These are things that I would, in my opinion, are important. I would love to hear what you guys think as well, but having some feedback on that would be interesting. And then jumping into like the more list, I also had a cross-departmental grant writer. I was looking back through my notes, and I think there were probably 3 or 4 different departments who noted the importance of applying for grants, the need for an actual grant writer for that department, and thinking, I don't believe one exists. If there is one, I would love to know, but someone who can serve in that capacity, potentially for multiple departments, seems like it would be more efficient. We haven't heard from them yet. We're hearing from municipal courts next week, but I'm really interested in the restorative justice program that they are rolling out, and would be curious if funding is needed for that. I think that's something that I would like to discuss if there is a funding need, in addition to what's already been allocated. I was interested in, from Parks and Rec, they had mentioned potentially the need for a clinical social worker at Malley and at the library. And I think it's interesting, especially, again, coming out of a time where people are vulnerable and thinking about how do we address both homelessness and crime effectively in our community. A clinical social worker in those kinds of spaces that can be available to people who may have need of that, I think is interesting and something that I think we could discuss that I had flagged. I remember in the city manager presentation, they had talked about a city intern program. So they're having college students come in and be interns in the city. It's a $5,000 cost, which to me actually seems quite low to bring on city interns. And they had actually noted that they could help track legislation and grant opportunity, which again, I think there's going to be so much COVID relief opportunities, right now. And I think someone who can really keep their eyes on that would be interesting. And I also just think right now, especially with the way our state and our country is encouraging some local public service and municipal experience in young professionals, it'd be really exciting for the city. So I like that. And then also, I think we heard from EPD. We also heard from HR and some different organizations just around the DEI effort in the city. I think that'd be worth something to discuss. I know it's something that's in the strategic plan. It's something that City Manager Lewis is paying a lot of attention to, but do we want to make any kind of statement around allocation of funds towards the DEI effort in the city? I think could be something to discuss. And then the last couple things I had on my list were the HR retirement payroll audit that we heard about last month. Feels like a treasure trove of potential dollars. I have no idea what that would look like and if it could be outsourced. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Josh. And then, yeah, that's basically what I had. So it's kind of a meandering list. I'm sorry, that's not very well organized. Something that I flagged.
Yeah, and that's pretty aligned with what I had written down. And I had written down a bullet point for accolades that mirrored what you just said. And yeah, and with HR, I wrote increase FTE, and then I wrote opportunity costs, because there are some opportunity costs with those retirement expenses. And Josh, that is your wheelhouse.
Yeah. So, and kind of looking back, the three presentations I've been a part of was Jackie's Introduction to Finance, utilities, and there wasn't a big ask out of either of those that I remember. And then obviously HR, who seemed to have a massive hole in their current FTE situation. And on top of that, knowing the complexities of the retirement plan world, some longstanding issues with that. As for the solving the retirement plan side, I know they've got Innovest. I believe Innovest is the consultant for the plan, and knowing Innovest, I worked with them previously when I was at Empower. They're one of the larger registered investment advisors in Colorado, and they're absolutely fantastic. I don't know how much they cover DC plans, but that would be an opportunity to explore, I think, expanding that relationship or finding a consultant who specializes in DC plans that might be able to help clean up that plan, because it sounds like it's not just the audit that's the issue. There's probably some structural things that need to be addressed and looked at to make sure it's operating right. So yeah, HR, obviously out of the three I saw had some compelling needs in terms of those opportunity costs, but also the effectiveness of the department. It sounds like they're just struggling with workloads right now.
Do you think that if the plans were restructured and optimized, that would result potentially in a cost saving, in your best guess?
It depends, because when you look at the plans, the complexities of some of these government plans, and I don't know enough about the full retirement system of Inglewood, but you've got two sides to it. You've got the deferred compensation plan, which is the voluntary benefits, and then you've got the pension plan. And it sounds like most of the issues are tied to the pension plan. My operational background was the voluntary plans, the deferred comp. So I'm not as familiar with the pension plans. You do have, it sounds like Inglewood's doing all that in-house in terms of the calculations and the actuarial tables. I know there's some providers that you can outsource that to, but once again, the complexities of the current situation to be able to move it to an outsource, you're talking about probably a lot of research into the plan to make sure that it could move, and then obviously an RFP process and all that fun with it as well. So it's not an easy task, and the question is, how big of a risk is it? Because if it's, you know, a couple people for $100 here and there that are missing, or is it a significant amount of risk that having that level? And I just don't know if they have the answers to that yet, or the easiest way to walk the right line of the time to get that answer and balancing. You know, we don't want to spend $50,000 to solve a $20,000 problem type of deal.
Certainly not.
So I think from that aspect, it's more of get the resources and start expanding on how to find the right path to address it versus having a good solution for them at this point.
Right. So do we all have consensus? I guess we can maybe work departmentally or on HR supporting some, like evaluating or encouraging looking at the efficiency of these plans and the potential cost savings that could be found in an audit. That piece, do we all feel good about including that in the report?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what do we think about the FTE request?
I mean, I'm pulling back up the numbers, but on a high level, it seemed to make sense. It seemed to be that when there was a transition of leadership, the previous leadership decided that they didn't need to fill the FTEs, and now it's realizing that that might not be the case, and Rhonda's looking for a little bit more support over there. So to me, there's a compelling case there, because it just sounded like they're struggling operationally. And if we want to think about, I've always been a big fan of HR functions when done properly, because of what it can funnel through for the rest of the employees, and then what those employees can now do for the citizens if they're taken care of. And so I naturally gravitate towards, that function and supporting HR more because of that knock-on effect. Whether it's 3 or 2, we can have that discussion, but I definitely think they need some more support over there from what we were hearing.
Yeah, and I guess my hesitation is, or what's, causing me to pause and think about this, is that nearly every department says, oh, we absolutely need 1, 2, or 3 more FTEs. I think HR presented it in the most objective and measurable manner, which is why it resonated with us. I think it's justifiable if the increase in FTE can help the department attack this issue with the retirement expenses.
And I think it's permissible for us, I mean, obviously as like a citizen commission or committee, to say, we see there's a compelling need here. It's worth considering the FTE request without maybe making a direct suggestion of how many. I'm not sure we need to get into those details unless someone else feels strongly. But I think their graph over, I think she said, I think it was like 10 years, and you could see the drop. And again, thinking about, I think Josh makes a compelling point. Is there a way that HR could be optimized to then optimize every other department that it influences? Seems like a reasonable use of funds.
Yeah, like for example, the request was a training and development specialist. So that's one that would funnel right through towards other employees. HR business partner representative. And I don't see a specific name or role for the third request, but those were the 2 that were included in the presentation.
Okay. I think there's some general alignment there. Do you feel good about that, Suzanne? Okay. Let's jump to the grant writer. That's also kind of like a cross-departmental one. I'm not aware, if there's a city staff member who knows if there is a grant writer officially on staff, please let me know. But my understanding is that at least not someone who can serve maybe all departments, and that might be naive of me to think that someone could serve all departments. But if there was someone who just even had expertise in grant writing, who could assist those departments with their grants, even if they might not have issue expertise, it seems, especially right now where there's I think going to be a lot of recovery money, like a really sound investment in the city, and I think a good financial move. Any thoughts on that?
Simply stated, I'm in agreement.
Okay.
Agreed, without going into a deep number analysis of what's the dollar amount of grants out there and all that. It seems like everyone's asking for centralized functions the way to go on that front.
Great. Just looking here. What do we think about the city intern request?
I like it. I'm in favor of it. How would we present that to council in a meaningful way? That's in the okay, sounds good category to me.
So that was when you mentioned a $5,000 cost. Is that per intern, or is that just to administer the program and it's going to be an unpaid internship?
I need to go back and look at the presentation. It was our very first one of the year last fall. That's just from my notes. I don't know if you have it, Suzanne, if you're flipping.
I'm flipping. And I just had eyes on it. Found it.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Full-time 1 semester. So what I wrote was internship, $5,000, track and trend, grant seeking. And it would be sometimes a 3-month term, full-time, or the equivalent of 1 semester.
Inherently, I'm not a fan of unpaid internships. There's a lot of philosophical things that I would need to get comfortable with to go that route. So as long as it's a paid program, that's something I would be more apt to support. But if it's an unpaid program, I'm going to need some conversations about that to get behind that.
Yeah, and I think the caliber of work that was described definitely warrants some level of compensation. Like this person is actually doing tangible work and contributing to city operations.
Yeah.
So I agree with you there.
Yeah, well, I can go back and listen to the recording. I think it was paid, but we can.
That was my takeaway.
I think it's worth piloting, especially because I am blanking on his name. Tim Dodd, the assistant city manager. He has managed a city internship program before in his previous position in a previous city. So I think he understands what it would take to make this work. And I think it'd be at least worth piloting for a year. And I think for me, the value prop to the city is it's such a pertinent time to get young people engaged in municipal government and to invite them in to create an opportunity for them to understand how you can affect change at a local level. There's really not an opportunity like that for young people in our city, and I think it could be really compelling to at least test out. Okay. So if it would be paid, are we comfortable with that inclusion?
Yes, I am.
Okay. What's another one? What am I missing, Suzanne? Do you have another one to bring up next?
Nothing at the departmental level. And I think we've listed some really good content so far.
What do we think about the clinical social worker?
I need to go back and listen to that. That had been wiped from my memory.
I can pull up my notes.
I can get on board with having a social worker, somebody with that type of role at Malley. I question the appropriateness of somebody in that role sitting within Parks and Rec. That said, I'd like to listen to that segment of a recording again to refresh my memory.
It's towards the end of my notes, and all it says, I can just let you know, it says clinical social worker at Malley or library for seniors and or homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another note about partnerships with nonprofits for homeless outreach, and there was a cost matching program, which I remember looking at this. She said that it was called the Bridge House program. They would match costs. So any kind of like grant or cost matching always catches my attention because I think it's a smart way to spend dollars. But maybe we go back and look at it and decide after that.
Yeah, I can agree to do that. And I agree with you when it comes to matching. And if they already have the infrastructure in place with another organization, it makes sense. So I'll list that as one of my action items to listen to that part of the conversation.
What about DEI? So I think this is interesting. When we heard from EPD, Chief Collins said, he's continuing to have recruitment challenges, which I think we hear from him every year. It's just really hard to get folks to apply. And he expressed also the desire for our police force to look more like our community. That he's been adding more women to the force and that he would love to add people of color, and that he's working on the diversity and inclusion efforts, I think especially in recruitment. And then we also heard that from HR. I have a note here that in the strategic plan, it says to develop diversity and inclusion training and a budget for all City of Englewood employees. So we heard it a lot. Obviously, it's been a big part of our societal conversation this last year. Is this something that we want to wade into? Is this a value that we want to express? Is it something we would rather not? I'd love to hear any thoughts. I'd also be happy to start.
I was going to say it's hard for me to fully comment, not have hearing, because D and I didn't come up too much outside of the HR's role in it. With my experience in it, I know it's one of those areas that when done right is fantastic, or when done for just checking the box, it's really ineffective and doesn't do too much. So that's the challenge. Like right off the bat, I have is I support effective programs in this space, but I also don't know enough to identify the effectiveness of programs as I'm talking about it. So it's like, yeah, it's great if it works, but everything's greater if it works type of, yeah.
I think that's actually a very good point, and that might be the kind of feedback that would be appropriate potentially is, if we do this, is it efficient? Is it done well? Is it not performative, but actually substantive? Are the right resources being selected from the right experts to ensure that our city looks, or our city government looks like our city population? I'm inclined to say something about, because it is in the strategic plan as a budget item, and the year we've had and where we're at. But I think what we say and how we say it could be very specific to doing this in an efficient way, and very targeted to what we would want to say. I don't want to say anything that maybe not everyone would feel good about.
Yeah. So one thing that Chief Collins has said time and time again, he is adamant about recruiting folks who want to work in Englewood and who are qualified to do so. So he wants to hire the best of the best, not because he has a vacancy to fill, but because they are the best candidate. So with that in mind, like you said, Chelsea, we have to be very intentional with how we communicate this. And yeah, it's like what Josh says, like we don't want to say that we want to increase diversity and be inclusive just to be sure that we're checking boxes. And I don't think council wants that either. And I don't think the police department wants it either. So I think we're all on the same page in how we say it, but I agree that it is an important topic of discussion.
If it seems good to the group, I would be happy to draft a section on this, and then we can talk about it and have actually language in front of us to kind of actually consider or to tweak or to edit. I think it might be easier than thinking about it hypothetically. And if we can't reach consensus on specific language, then I think it's fine to not include, but I'm happy to do that if we feel good about moving forward that way.
I think that's a great plan. Thank you. While you're in there, do you want to draft language on restorative justice?
Yeah, I think
Does that excites you?
it does. Guys, it's a very interesting program. I'll be curious what you think. I'm sure it will come up next week, and I don't even know if there will be a budget request. I know that there has already been an allocation. But I think it's an incredibly creative way to think about criminal justice. So I'm very interested. So I'm curious what you guys think after next month. But with the time we have remaining, since I think we've gone through everything on our list, unless anyone has a huge flag, should we divvy up some of these sections for us to write, and then we can put them in the Google Doc and kind of all noodle on them for our next meeting, and then maybe we could discuss a first draft during members' choice next month?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm sure we've all been writing down. I think if we were to assign sections to the three of us, Chelsea, as we just talked about, you could take DEI with respect to PD and restorative justice. Josh, HR and all things retirement plans. I'd be happy to own the grant writer piece. Maybe Josh and I together could take the administrative intern, or I could. Either way, I'm happy to. I'm happy to take grant writer and the grant writer section, and anything else you want to assign to me.
You know what you might be great for you is, what do you think about doing the accolades section?
Yep.
Do you feel good about it? Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't mind doing the interns. It's pretty simple. Josh, I feel like HR actually is going to be kind of a chunk.
There's a little bit to unpack there for sure.
Okay.
You more than that.
Yeah.
You're comfortable.
Well, while I'm in there writing about all things grant writers, why don't I also take or incorporate a paragraph or two on operationalizing some of the benefits that have been grant funded due to COVID or otherwise.
I love that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a section maybe under the grant writer, and this is, I can send you my quick bullet points, but just about like we had talked about, like the housing rehabilitation grant and small business and economic development, all of those, just protecting the ones we have and then using this position to get even more as we recover, and with like a strong COVID recovery lens. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as getting this done, this is more informational for Josh, but what we did last year was, we don't want to have 3 or more meet because of sunshine laws, and we don't want to have a quorum, but 1 or 2 of us, I guess 2 of us would pair together and work through some of these sections. So Chelsea and I had a coffee meeting and worked through a few sections, and Steve met with another member and worked through a few others. So I'm open to that too. Plus, I like to see you guys.
Definitely. And then I think, Jenny, you said even in the Google Docs, if 3 of us are signed in at the same time, that's technically not allowed, just so we're aware of it.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So
I haven't seen that happen yet.
2 other people in, and then you have to just hop out until someone drops off. But I can send out the Google Doc to the group if we want, and kind of maybe do some headings so people know where to add their sections.
Perfect.
Yes, please.
And then I think rough drafts next month is fine. Like at least some thoughts on paper, something for us to kind of discuss. I'll try to have the DEI thing done by then so we can have a conversation about it. And then we can maybe have those in-person meetings like you mentioned, Suzanne, or before that if we want. And then maybe a final meeting to finalize after that, mid-July.
Yeah.
Good.
That's the plan.
Wonderful. All right, we have 4 minutes. Is there anything else for members' choice or anything that we may have missed?
Nothing stands out to me.
Okay, wonderful. The only thing I wanted to flag, since you're doing the grant piece, Suzanne, is in utilities, which I thought was just a tremendous presentation. They had, I don't know if I'm saying it right, the WIFA grant. I think it's a federal program, WIFA. Mm-hmm. It was incredible. The cost mapping and it looked like they are maybe going to need some additional support because it was an ongoing kind of iterative process and a competitive process for that grant. I think maybe noting that would be great as well.
Okay.
I know the director brought it up to council as well as saying it was like a great opportunity for the city. So I think doubling down behind that and saying this is the kind of innovation that like I think as citizens and as taxpayers we love to see, and we're really would love to continue to support that effort. Might be nice to add there.
Yeah, I've got notes on that. I see it's a 49-51 split between federal funding and city funding. They've at the time they had drafted their LOI. So yeah, send me what you have and I will make note of that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, funding.
Does anyone have anything else, including any staff? Anything I'm missing?
I don't have anything.
Wonderful.
Do we have any updates on the new member applications? I'm sorry, I didn't check the schedule on when all that's going in and what the process is.
I think the interviews are this coming Monday, and Councilmember Russell can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have 2 vacant positions.
Actually, interviews were last night.
Oh, last night. I've lost track of time.
So we have now, this is all predicated on voting at the next council meeting. There is a certified public accountant that has been appointed to your group, which will be huge, I think. And I think that we have some good people assigned to this group. So there were a lot of people interviewing. There were a lot more people interviewing for boards than before. Not so many positions available. I mean, you all have positions, but some of the other boards, the reapplication people filled the positions. But so it was a good evening.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I think they will then, once we vote, the new appointments will be the first meeting in July, I think.
Mm.
And I was listening to the interviews and I listened to the CPA interview and I'm excited to have him, assuming.
Do you remember the name of the firm, Suzanne?
Oh, I don't even
No.
know if he brought it up.
I'll go back and
Did
listen.
you remember
He's
Russell?
working for DeVita right now, but he used to work at Ernst & Young.
Oh, that's
And he has,
yeah, Big Four.
yeah,
Must be sharp.
Right.
Great.
yeah, I'm excited.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and hop off and move on to my next meeting. And I'm glad I'm the reason that you guys get 30 minutes back.
Great, thank you.
You're a super citizen for serving in multiple places. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, everyone. I will see you next month, if not sooner.
Wonderful. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.